Code red, someone call the police." That was Victor Chen screaming into his phone at 6:47 a.m., standing in the middle of Ocean View Drive, covered head to toe in permanent purple UV dye, surrounded by exploded glitter that sparkled like a disco ball, while 6 GPS trackers beeped loudly from inside his designer jacket pockets. The man looked like he'd lost a fight with a craft store and a crime lab at the same time. Every neighbor within 3 blocks rushed to their windows to witness our respected HOA treasurer having the worst morning of his entire life. What he didn't know was that I'd been tracking his every move for 3 months, and this morning's explosion was just the opening act. Hey friends, welcome back to HOA Backdoor Stories. Good to see you here again. Let me know, where are you watching from today? Sit back, relax, and let's take a closer look behind the closed doors of another unbelievable HOA drama. Let me back up and tell you how a cybersecurity expert turned her own neighborhood into the most monitored crime scene in South Florida. My name is Zara Ahmed, and 8 months ago, I thought moving to Coral Breeze Gardens in Miami was going to solve all my problems. Fresh start in a beautiful gated community, work from home doing penetration testing for tech companies, take care of my elderly mother who just moved in with me after my father passed away. The smell of salt air mixed with jasmine from the community gardens hit me every morning. It was supposed to be peaceful. It was supposed to be safe. Then I met Victor Chen, and peaceful went straight out the window, along with $3,000 worth of my property and my mother's life-saving medications. Victor was 51 years old, impeccably dressed, drove a white Mercedes Sprinter van that he claimed was for his commercial real estate consulting business, and had been HOA treasurer for 6 straight years. Everyone loved him. Guy organized community events, helped elderly residents with their groceries, volunteered at the holiday food drive, posted motivational quotes on the neighborhood Facebook group every single morning. He was the kind of neighbor you'd trust with your house keys while you were on vacation. That was his superpower, being so trustworthy that nobody would ever suspect him of anything. But here's what I learned about people who build elaborate trust networks in small communities. Sometimes they're genuinely good people, and sometimes they're building the perfect cover for something much darker. My first package disappeared 3 days after I moved in. $45 replacement cable for my work laptop. Tracking said delivered at 11:17 a.m. on a Thursday. I got home at 6 p.m. and found nothing. Called the carrier, filed a claim, figured it was random bad luck. Then a $70 ergonomic mouse vanished. Then a $180 external hard drive containing backup files for a client project. That's when I installed basic security cameras, nothing fancy yet, just trying to see what was happening while I was working inside. The footage told an interesting story. Packages only disappeared on weekday mornings between 9 and noon. Only when most residents were at work or running errands. Only when Victor's white van was parked somewhere on our street doing what he called property evaluations for potential commercial buyers. But the pattern that really caught my attention wasn't about timing. It was about selection. This wasn't random grab and run theft. Victor would pull up in his van, walk casually to various porches like he belonged there, examine shipping labels, weigh packages in his hands like he was shopping at a farmer's market, and only take the ones that seemed valuable. He'd leave the obvious Amazon Basics boxes and only grab the ones marked with electronics retailers, medical suppliers, or specialty shops. The man was shopping from neighborhood porches like it was his personal warehouse, and his taste was expensive. Then my mother's insulin went missing, and everything changed. $340 worth of temperature-sensitive medication that she needed to survive. Tracking showed delivered at 9:32 a.m. I checked my basic camera footage, and there was Victor, bold as brass, reading the medical supply label, nodding to himself like he'd just found a good deal, and walking straight to his van with my mother's life-saving medication. I called him immediately, asked if he'd seen any packages delivered to my address that morning. Know what he said? "No packages today, Zara, but I'll keep an eye out for you. These delivery drivers can be so careless sometimes." The man was standing next to my stolen property while lying directly to my face, and his voice had that practiced sincerity that probably fooled everyone else in the community. That's when I stopped being a worried daughter and started being what I actually am, a professional penetration tester who finds security vulnerabilities and exploits them before criminals can. My job is literally breaking into systems, finding weaknesses, and documenting everything with forensic precision. Victor Chen had just become my most personal case, and he had no idea that the woman he'd been stealing from spent 40 hours a week thinking like a criminal for a living. I upgraded my security system that weekend. Not just cameras anymore. I installed cellular backup systems that couldn't be disabled by cutting power, motion sensors that triggered instant alerts to my phone, infrared cameras for night vision, audio recording equipment sensitive enough to pick up whispered conversations from 20 feet away, and cloud storage with triple redundancy, so even if someone destroyed every piece of equipment I had, the evidence would already be safely uploaded to servers in 3 different states. Then I did something that would become crucial later. I started documenting Victor's entire routine, what time he left his house each morning, which streets he drove down, how long he spent parked in different locations, which houses he approached and which he avoided. I created a spreadsheet tracking every pattern, every deviation, every suspicious behavior. My mother thought I was obsessed. She was right, but obsession with details is what catches criminals who think they're too smart to get caught. Within 2 weeks, I had enough data to predict Victor's movements with 87% accuracy. He had a system, a very specific pattern of behavior that he followed religiously, and patterns are what get criminals caught every single time. The packages kept disappearing, but now I was watching everything in real time. A $120 smart home hub taken from the Martinez family 3 houses down. $200 headphones from the elderly Johnsons who were already struggling on fixed income. A $350 graphics card from the college kid who'd saved for months to upgrade his gaming computer. Victor wasn't just stealing from me anymore. I was watching him systematically rob 15 different families in our community, and nobody else had any idea it was happening because everyone trusted the friendly HOA treasurer who always had time for a chat and a smile. But here's what made Victor truly dangerous as a criminal. He wasn't keeping the stolen property. Within 48 hours of every theft, items would appear for sale on Facebook Marketplace, eBay, and something called Mercari that I'd never even heard of before. He had accounts under 3 different fake names: Vibrant Deals 305, Sunshine Electronics, and Treasure Coast Finds. Each account had hundreds of positive reviews built up over months of selling stolen merchandise. The man had turned package theft into a sophisticated business operation with inventory management, multiple sales channels, and customer service that kept buyers coming back. I spent a week creating fake buyer accounts and tracking his sales patterns. He was moving $20,000 to $30,000 worth of stolen goods every single month, and that was just from our neighborhood. Police records showed similar theft patterns in 3 adjacent communities where Victor also did his commercial real estate consulting work. Then I discovered something that elevated this from simple theft to something much more serious. Victor wasn't just selling random packages, he was specifically targeting medical supplies, prescription medications, and controlled substances that he could sell for massive markup on underground marketplaces. My mother's insulin that cost $340 retail, he sold it for $150 cash to diabetics who couldn't afford pharmacy prices. Heart medications, blood pressure pills, even cancer drugs that cost thousands of dollars. He was literally stealing life-saving medications from sick people and reselling them to other sick people who were desperate enough to buy pharmaceuticals from strangers on the internet. This wasn't just property crime anymore. This was medical fraud with potential manslaughter implications if someone died from improperly stored medication that he'd stolen and resold. I took everything I had to the Miami-Dade Police Department. 4 hours of video evidence, sales records, fake account information, tracking numbers that matched police reports from other neighborhoods, even timestamps showing Victor's van parked outside houses minutes before packages were reported stolen. The detective who took my report was a tired-looking woman named Elena Rodriguez, who'd probably seen every type of suburban crime imaginable in her 23-year career. She watched my videos, nodded a few times, took notes, and then said the words that made my blood boil. "This is good evidence for civil court. But for criminal prosecution, we need him caught in the act with stolen property in his possession, clear criminal intent, and ideally multiple witnesses. What you have here shows suspicious behavior, but a good defense attorney could argue coincidental timing and circumstantial evidence. Coincidental timing: the man was on camera taking packages that didn't belong to him and selling them online under fake names within 48 hours. But Detective Rodriguez explained something about Florida law that changed my entire strategy. Theft under $500 is petty theft, a misdemeanor that usually results in fines and probation for first-time offenders. Theft over $500 is grand theft, a felony with serious prison time. But organized scheme to defraud, that's when someone runs a systematic operation stealing from multiple victims over extended time, automatically upgraded everything to third-degree felony with up to 5 years in state prison. The key was proving organization and intent, showing this wasn't opportunistic crime, but calculated criminal enterprise. I needed Victor to take one more package, but this package needed to be special, valuable enough to cross the felony threshold, traceable enough to prove possession, and documented enough to eliminate any possible defense. That's when I designed the trap that would end Victor Chen's criminal career and become a case study that law enforcement agencies would use for training. The package would look completely ordinary from outside. Standard Amazon packaging, realistic shipping label, appropriate weight for electronics, even fake tracking number that would scan correctly if Victor checked it. But inside was something extraordinary. A custom-built device that contained 6 separate GPS trackers, each with its own cellular connection so he couldn't disable all of them. 4 miniature cameras recording in 4 directions with automatic cloud upload every 30 seconds. A microphone array sensitive enough to record conversations through car doors and storage unit walls. Ultraviolet marking dye that would permanently stain skin and clothing for forensic identification. Biodegradable glitter that would scatter everywhere, creating impossible-to-clean evidence, and a remote-triggered release mechanism that I could activate from my phone once Victor had taken possession and transported the package away from my property. The total declared value of the fake electronics inside was $675, safely over Florida's felony threshold, but the real value was the evidence collection system that would document every second of Victor's crime, from theft to transportation to storage to attempted resale. I spent 3 weeks building and testing every component. The GPS trackers were commercial-grade units designed for vehicle fleet management, impossible to detect without electronic countermeasure equipment that Victor definitely didn't have. The cameras were modified smartphone components with custom firmware that uploaded footage even if the device was destroyed. The UV dye was law enforcement grade, only visible under black light but permanent once it contacted skin, and the glitter was commercial craft supply that would stick to everything and spread to anything Victor touched for days afterward. But the masterpiece was the timing mechanism. Once the package moved more than 100 feet from my property, a 30-minute countdown would begin. Long enough for Victor to drive to wherever he took stolen goods, short enough that he wouldn't have time to examine contents before the trap activated. When the timer hit 0, servo motors would release the UV dye and glitter simultaneously, while the cameras captured his reaction, and the GPS units sent automated alerts to Detective Rodriguez with exact coordinates and streaming video links. Even if Victor immediately destroyed the package, the evidence would already be uploaded and the alerts already sent. I also did something that would prove crucial for the legal case. I recruited witnesses. Not just any witnesses, but strategic observers positioned to document everything from multiple angles. Sarah Martinez, 3 houses down, became my primary surveillance coordinator. She worked from home as a graphic designer and had a perfect view of the street from her second-floor office. Frank Johnson, the retired accountant who lived next door, agreed to monitor from his front porch during morning hours when Victor typically operated. Even college student Marcus, who'd lost his gaming equipment, became part of the network, ready with his phone camera if anything went down. We created a private signal chat group where everyone could communicate instantly if Victor showed up. It wasn't just about catching one thief anymore. It became about protecting an entire community that had been victimized for months without even knowing it. The psychological preparation was just as important as the technical setup. I studied criminal behavior patterns, read case files of similar theft operations, consulted with 2 different attorneys about evidence requirements and entrapment laws, Florida has very specific rules about what constitutes a legal trap versus illegal entrapment. The key difference is that you can create an opportunity for someone to commit a crime they're already committing, but you cannot induce someone to commit a crime they wouldn't normally commit. Since Victor had already stolen multiple packages and was actively operating a criminal enterprise, placing a valuable package on my own porch was simply providing another opportunity for him to do what he was already doing. No entrapment, just documentation of ongoing criminal behavior. My mother thought I was taking this too far. She kept saying we should just move to a different community, avoid the confrontation, let the police handle it through normal channels. But I explained something to her that changed her perspective completely. Victor wasn't just stealing packages. He was stealing medications from people who desperately needed them, insulin from diabetics, heart pills from cardiac patients, cancer drugs from people fighting for their lives. Every package he took could mean someone ended up in the emergency room or worse. This wasn't about revenge or getting my stuff back. This was about stopping someone who was literally putting lives at risk for profit. When I framed it that way, she understood. Sometimes good people have to do uncomfortable things to stop bad people from hurting vulnerable victims. The trap was ready. The witnesses were positioned. The evidence collection system was tested and operational. All I needed now was for Victor to do what he'd been doing for over a year, take one more package that didn't belong to him. But this time, that package would end his criminal career and expose him to everyone he'd been deceiving for so long. The countdown to justice had officially begun. Tuesday morning arrived with that perfect Florida sunshine that makes everything look like a postcard. I placed the trap package on my front porch at exactly 7:43 a.m., the same time legitimate deliveries usually arrived in our neighborhood. The box sat there looking completely innocent, just another Amazon shipment waiting to be picked up. But inside that cardboard exterior was the most sophisticated evidence collection system I'd ever built, and in about 2 hours, it would change everything. I sent the signal to my witness network through our encrypted chat group. Package deployed. Stand by for contact. Sarah Martinez confirmed visual from her office window. Frank Johnson took position on his front porch with his morning coffee and newspaper, the perfect cover for surveillance. Marcus was on standby with his phone camera ready. Detective Rodriguez had been notified that today was likely the day, and she'd arranged for patrol units to be in the area on standby. Everything was synchronized like a military operation, and now we just had to wait for Victor's greed to override his caution one more time. Victor's white Mercedes Sprinter van appeared at 9:17 a.m., exactly within his normal operating window. My phone buzzed with alerts from 3 different motion sensors as he drove slowly down Ocean View Drive, doing what looked like his usual property evaluation routine. He parked 4 houses down from mine, got out with his tablet and professional-looking clipboard, and started his performance. This was Victor's genius and his fatal flaw. He never looked like a criminal. He looked like a busy professional doing legitimate work, walking confidently, waving to neighbors, checking properties like he belonged there. It's why nobody suspected him for so long. But I'd studied his patterns for months, and I knew the difference between his legitimate consulting work and his theft routine. The legitimate work involved actually talking to homeowners, taking photos, making notes. The theft routine involved casual walks past multiple houses, quick glances to see who was home, and that telltale pause when he spotted an interesting package. He walked past my house once at 9:24 a.m., barely glancing at the porch. Second pass at 9:31 a.m., slowing down slightly to read the shipping label from a distance. I watched through my hidden cameras as his eyes locked onto the electronics retailer logo and the package dimensions that suggested something valuable inside. Third pass at 9:38 a.m., and this time he stopped completely. He looked left, looked right, checked for witnesses with the practiced casualness of someone who'd done this hundreds of times before. Then he pulled out his phone and pretended to take a call while walking directly toward my front porch. The performance was almost admirable. Anyone watching would think he was just a guy on a business call happening to walk near someone's house, but I'd seen this exact routine 17 times in my surveillance footage. The fake phone call was his security blanket, his excuse if anyone questioned why he was approaching private property. Victor picked up my package at 9:41 a.m. and 17 seconds. The timestamp would become important later in court documents. He tucked it under his arm while still pretending to talk on his phone, walked back to his van with unhurried confidence, and placed my trap carefully in the cargo area among what looked like legitimate real estate documents and property evaluation equipment. He had no idea that at that exact moment 6 GPS trackers activated and began transmitting his location to secure servers. 4 cameras started recording in 4 directions with automatic cloud backup every 30 seconds. The 30-minute countdown timer began its inexorable march toward 0. I sent the alert to my witness network. Package taken. Timer active. Track and document. Sarah confirmed she had video of the theft from her window. Frank got photos of Victor placing the package in his van. Marcus captured footage from street level showing clear identification of Victor's face and license plate. Victor drove away at 9:44 a.m., heading south on Ocean View Drive toward the commercial district. The GPS tracking showed him taking surface streets instead of the highway, probably his standard route to avoid traffic cameras. I watched the real-time location updates on my laptop while simultaneously monitoring the hidden camera feeds from inside the package. The view was mostly dark cargo area and occasional jostling as the van moved, but the audio was crystal clear. I could hear Victor's actual phone conversations now that he wasn't faking calls. He was talking to someone about property listings, completely normal business discussion, like he hadn't just committed felony theft 3 minutes earlier. The compartmentalization was remarkable. This man could steal someone's property and immediately switch back to legitimate business mode without any apparent psychological transition. At 9:58 a.m., the GPS showed Victor pulling into a commercial storage facility called Secure Space Self-Storage on Southwest 8th Street. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I'd suspected he had a storage unit where he processed stolen goods before selling them online, but I'd never been able to confirm the location. Now I watched through the GPS tracking as he parked, and the camera feeds showed him opening the van's cargo area with bright sunlight streaming in. He grabbed my package along with 2 other boxes I didn't recognize, probably stolen from other neighborhoods, and carried them toward a ground-floor storage unit. The timer showed 23 minutes remaining. He was inside his storage unit now, and I could hear him moving around, the sound of other packages being shuffled, boxes being opened and examined. He was shopping through his stolen inventory, deciding what to list for sale first. At 10:04 a.m., Victor opened my trap package. I heard the distinctive sound of packing tape being cut, cardboard flaps being pulled open, and then his voice. "What the hell? This is just electronics parts. Who orders this expensive?" He had no idea those electronics parts were actually GPS trackers and camera modules, and he definitely had no idea that in 9 minutes and 37 seconds, his entire criminal operation was about to explode in the most literal and spectacular way possible. I sent another alert to Detective Rodriguez with the exact storage facility address and unit number. She confirmed patrol units were moving into position. The GPS data was being automatically logged as evidence with timestamps and location coordinates. Everything was being documented in real time with the kind of forensic precision that defense attorneys hate and prosecutors love. At 10:13 a.m. and 42 seconds, the timer hit 0. The servo motors activated with a soft mechanical click that the microphones picked up clearly. Then came the whoosh of compressed air as the UV dye canister released its contents under pressure, followed immediately by the glitter explosion that sent thousands of metallic particles in every direction. Victor's reaction was instantaneous and spectacular. "What the? Oh my God! What is this?" His voice went from confusion to panic in about half a second. The cameras captured everything in perfect, high-definition clarity. Purple UV dye spraying across his hands, face, and designer polo shirt. Silver glitter erupting like a craft store grenade, coating everything within 6 feet. Victor stumbling backward, knocking over boxes of stolen merchandise, trying to wipe the dye off his hands but only spreading it further. The glitter was sticking to everything, his clothes, his hair, the storage unit walls, other stolen packages. It was beautiful chaos, and every second was being recorded and uploaded to 3 different cloud servers where it could never be deleted or destroyed. Victor ran out of his storage unit looking like he'd been attacked by a unicorn that exploded in a crime lab. Purple dye covered his face and hands, silver glitter sparkled in his hair and on his expensive clothes, and his expression was pure panic mixed with confusion. He frantically tried to brush the glitter off, but that only spread it further across his designer watch and leather shoes. The UV dye was already bonding to his skin at the molecular level, and he had no idea that under blacklight he would glow like a neon sign for the next 2 weeks. He pulled out his phone with shaking, purple-stained hands and started to dial, probably trying to call someone for help or advice, when Detective Elena Rodriguez's unmarked sedan pulled into the storage facility parking lot, followed by 2 Miami-Dade patrol units with lights flashing. The timing was absolutely perfect. Victor looked up from his phone and froze like a deer in headlights. Detective Rodriguez stepped out of her car with the kind of calm confidence that comes from 23 years of catching criminals who thought they were clever. She took one look at Victor, covered in purple dye and glitter, standing outside a storage unit filled with stolen packages, and actually smiled. "Victor Chen, I'm Detective Rodriguez, Miami-Dade Police. We need to have a conversation about some missing packages." Victor's brain was clearly trying to process multiple disasters at once: the exploding package, the dye that wouldn't come off, the glitter that was everywhere, and now police officers approaching with handcuffs ready. He went through the 5 stages of grief in about 10 seconds flat. Denial came first. "Detective, there's been a misunderstanding. I'm a victim here. Someone booby-trapped a package and left it at my storage unit. This is assault or something. I need to file a report." Detective Rodriguez nodded sympathetically while pulling on latex gloves. "Interesting theory. Mind if we take a look inside your storage unit?" Victor's face went through another color change as he realized his mistake. "Actually, I don't consent to any searches. I know my rights. You need a warrant." Detective Rodriguez pulled out her phone and showed him something on the screen. "Funny thing about warrants, Mr. Chen. When we have real-time GPS evidence showing stolen property being transported to a specific location, plus live video feed of that property being opened by a specific individual, judges get really cooperative about signing search warrants. We've had one ready for the last 15 minutes. We were just waiting for you to finish opening that particular package." She gestured to the patrol officers who moved toward the storage unit, while one of them pulled out a document from his patrol car. "This is a valid search warrant for Storage Unit 217 at Secure Space Self-Storage, issued by Judge Maria Santos at 9:58 a.m. this morning." The look on Victor's face was priceless. It was the exact moment when a criminal realizes they've been completely outmaneuvered, that every move they made was being watched and documented, that their clever scheme wasn't clever at all but painfully obvious to people who actually knew what they were doing. Detective Rodriguez continued in that same calm, professional voice. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to read you your rights now. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." While she recited the Miranda warning, the patrol officers entered the storage unit and started documenting what they found. Their reactions were visible even from outside. One officer let out a low whistle. Another started taking photos with his body camera. A third began calling for additional units to help with evidence processing. What they found inside Victor's storage unit became the stuff of law enforcement legend. Over 300 packages in various stages of being processed for resale. Electronics, medical supplies, designer clothes, jewelry, prescription medications, even pet supplies and baby formula. Every single item was tagged with sticky notes indicating online marketplace listings, prices, and buyer information. Victor had essentially created a warehouse distribution center for stolen goods, complete with inventory management and customer service notes. The total value of merchandise recovered that day was $42,738, not counting the medications, which had separate legal implications. There were packages with shipping labels from 15 different neighborhoods across 3 zip codes. Some items had been in the storage unit for months. Others were brand new thefts from that same week. Detective Rodriguez called for a forensic accounting team and additional detectives to help process everything, but the real evidence goldmine was Victor's laptop, which was sitting on a folding table in the storage unit, charging from a power strip. He'd been managing his entire criminal enterprise from his storage unit office. The laptop contained spreadsheets tracking thefts by date and location, sales records from 5 different online marketplaces, buyer contact information, even notes about which neighborhoods had the most valuable packages and the best theft opportunities. There were photos of items before and after he repackaged them to hide their origin, email conversations with buyers negotiating prices for prescription medications, bank statements showing deposits from online sales totaling over $90,000 in the past 18 months. Victor Chen hadn't just been stealing packages. He'd been running a sophisticated criminal operation with business planning and profit optimization. While patrol officers secured the scene and evidence technicians began their work, Victor sat in the back of a patrol car still covered in purple dye and glitter, handcuffed and looking absolutely defeated. The glitter kept falling off him like sad little sparkles of karma with every movement he made. Detective Rodriguez approached my car where I'd been watching everything from a discreet distance. "Ms. Ahmed, this is the most well-documented case I've seen in 15 years. The video evidence alone would be enough to convict, but combined with the GPS tracking, the recovered stolen property, and his own business records, this is basically a prosecutor's dream. I don't think I've ever seen someone build such a perfect case against themselves." I asked her what charges Victor would be facing. She pulled out her notebook and started listing them. Grand theft for the high-value items, organized scheme to defraud because of the systematic nature of the operation, trafficking in stolen property for the resale business, possession of prescription medications without authorization, and that's just the state charges. The postal inspectors are very interested because some of those packages were sent through USPS, which makes it federal mail theft. He's looking at minimum 10 years if convicted on all counts. The news spread through Coral Breeze Gardens faster than glitter spreads through a craft store explosion. By noon, our neighborhood Facebook group had over 200 comments from residents who suddenly realized their missing packages weren't random bad luck, but systematic theft by the man they'd trusted as HOA treasurer. People started sharing their own stories of missing deliveries, expensive items that never arrived, medications that mysteriously vanished. Some residents had lost thousands of dollars in property over the months. The Martinez family discovered their daughter's laptop that disappeared 6 months ago was in Victor's storage unit. The elderly Johnsons found their grandson's birthday gifts that they thought had been lost by the shipping company. Even people from other neighborhoods started coming forward with reports of missing packages during the same time periods when Victor had been doing property evaluations in their communities. Sarah Martinez organized an emergency community meeting for that evening at the clubhouse. Over 90 residents showed up, and the mood was a mixture of shock, anger, and relief. Shock that someone they trusted had betrayed them so completely. Anger at how long it had gone on and how much they'd collectively lost. Relief that the thief was finally caught and their packages might be recovered. Frank Johnson stood up during the meeting and said something that captured everyone's feelings perfectly. Victor Chen fooled all of us. He used our trust and our community spirit as camouflage for criminal behavior. But he made one critical mistake. He stole from someone who had the skills, the determination, and the technical knowledge to catch him. Zara didn't just catch a thief, she protected our entire community. The applause that followed made me uncomfortable, but also proud. This wasn't about personal revenge anymore. It was about protecting neighbors who couldn't protect themselves. The legal process moved faster than anyone expected once prosecutors saw the mountain of evidence I'd collected. Victor's attorney tried every defense strategy imaginable during the preliminary hearings. He claimed the trap package was entrapment, that I'd induced Victor to commit a crime he wouldn't normally commit. The judge shut that down in about 30 seconds after reviewing my documentation, showing Victor had stolen 17 packages before I ever placed the trap. He argued the UV dye and glitter bomb constituted assault, and my evidence should be thrown out as fruit of the poisonous tree. The prosecutor responded by showing the non-lethal nature of the materials and the fact that Victor only encountered them while actively committing felony theft of my property. Every defense strategy crumbled against the weight of video evidence, GPS tracking data, recovered stolen property, and Victor's own meticulous business records that documented every crime he'd committed. The breakthrough came when federal postal inspectors got involved. 14 of the packages Victor had stolen were shipped through United States Postal Service, which made them subject to federal mail theft statutes, carrying mandatory minimum sentences. The combination of state grand theft charges, organized fraud charges, and federal mail theft charges meant Victor was looking at 15 to 20 years in prison if he went to trial and lost. His attorney knew the evidence was overwhelming. Every package in that storage unit had been photographed and cataloged. Every sale on his online marketplaces had been traced back to stolen property. His laptop contained a literal instruction manual for his criminal enterprise, complete with spreadsheets and profit calculations. There was no reasonable defense, no way to claim innocence or misunderstanding. Victor Chen had documented his own crimes with the thoroughness of someone who never imagined getting caught. 3 months after his arrest, Victor accepted a plea deal to avoid trial. He pleaded guilty to organized scheme to defraud, grand theft, trafficking in stolen property, and federal mail theft. The sentencing hearing was packed with victims who wanted to see justice served. The Martinez family was there because their daughter's laptop had been stolen. The Johnsons attended because their grandson's gifts had vanished. Even people from other neighborhoods showed up to represent the dozens of victims across multiple communities. My mother came with me and held my hand during the proceedings. She'd gotten her medications back from evidence lockup, but more importantly, she'd watched her daughter stand up to someone who was hurting vulnerable people and win. The judge was a stern-looking woman named Patricia Williams, who had a reputation for harsh sentences in theft cases involving elderly or vulnerable victims. She reviewed the presentence report, which detailed every aspect of Victor's criminal operation: the systematic targeting of medical supplies, the reselling of prescription medications to desperate patients who couldn't afford pharmacy prices, the months of deception while serving as a trusted HOA officer. When Judge Williams finally spoke, her voice was cold with controlled anger. "Mr. Chen, you held a position of trust in your community and used that trust as cover for systematic theft from your neighbors. You stole medications from sick people, birthday gifts from children, and essential items from elderly residents on fixed incomes. You turned theft into a business operation with inventory management and profit optimization. This court finds your actions to be particularly egregious because you specifically targeted vulnerable victims and showed no remorse until you were caught." Victor's sentencing took less than 5 minutes. 8 years in federal prison for the mail theft charges, 6 years in state prison for organized fraud and grand theft to run concurrent with the federal sentence, 3 years supervised probation after release, full restitution of $42,738 to victims, permanent ban from serving in any HOA leadership position in Florida, forfeiture of all proceeds from stolen property sales, including the contents of 3 bank accounts totaling $91,000. The money would be distributed among victims to compensate for unrecovered property and the time value of their losses. Victor's wife, who had filed for divorce 2 weeks after his arrest, received none of the forfeited funds, since prosecutors proved she had no knowledge of his criminal activities. She moved out of Coral Breeze Gardens within a month, trying to rebuild her life away from the scandal. The impact on our community went far beyond one criminal getting sentenced. The HOA board called emergency elections and completely restructured our leadership. New bylaws required financial transparency with monthly reports posted publicly. Security measures were implemented, including community package lockers and enhanced surveillance at entry points. A neighborhood watch program was established with trained coordinators and direct communication with local police. But the biggest change was cultural. People started looking out for each other in ways they hadn't before. Neighbors checked on elderly residents. Parents coordinated delivery times so someone was always home. The community that had been fractured by suspicion and theft became stronger through shared experience of overcoming a common threat. Detective Rodriguez told me weeks later that my case had become a training example for property crimes units across Florida. The combination of technical surveillance, legal documentation, and community coordination was being taught as a model for how civilians could work with law enforcement to catch sophisticated criminals. She said 3 other package theft rings had been broken up using similar techniques after detectives studied my methods. The purple dye and glitter trap became particularly popular because it provided immediate visible evidence that couldn't be washed off or hidden. Several law enforcement agencies were now recommending similar marking systems for high-value theft investigations. 6 months after Victor's sentencing, I was invited to speak at a community safety conference in Orlando. Standing in front of 200 people, including law enforcement, HOA board members, and concerned residents, I told them something I'd learned through this entire experience. Technology is powerful, but it's not enough by itself. What caught Victor Chen wasn't just cameras and GPS trackers. It was a community that decided to stop being passive victims and start actively protecting each other. It was neighbors who trusted each other enough to coordinate and communicate. It was people who refused to accept that theft was just a normal part of modern life. The applause after my presentation felt different from the applause at our community meeting. This wasn't about personal vindication anymore. It was about empowering other communities to protect themselves. My mother's health stabilized once her medications started arriving reliably. The hospital bills from her hypertensive crisis were covered by the restitution fund from Victor's forfeited assets. She told me one evening while we were having dinner that she was proud of how I'd handled everything, not just catching the thief, but doing it legally and ethically in ways that made the community stronger rather than tearing it apart. "You could have just moved away," she said, "found a different neighborhood and avoided the confrontation, but you stayed and fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves. That's real courage." Coming from her, that meant everything. A year after Victor's arrest, Coral Breeze Gardens was completely transformed. Package theft was virtually non-existent thanks to the security measures and community awareness. Property values had actually increased because potential buyers saw our community as safe and well-organized. The HOA newsletter featured regular security tips and neighbor spotlights, celebrating people who looked out for each other. We'd gone from a place where people barely knew their neighbors to a genuine community where people cared about each other's well-being. Sometimes the worst situations bring out the best in people, and watching my neighbors come together to support each other after Victor's betrayal restored my faith in human nature. The final closure came when I received a letter from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Victor had been transferred to a minimum security facility in North Florida, where he was teaching computer literacy classes to other inmates as part of his rehabilitation program. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who'd used technology for theft was now teaching others how to use it legitimately. Maybe there was hope for redemption, even for people who'd made terrible choices. I didn't forgive Victor for what he'd done. The medications he stole could have killed my mother. The trust he betrayed hurt an entire community, but I hoped he'd learned something from his imprisonment, that he'd emerge as someone who contributed positively to society instead of stealing from it. Looking back on everything, I realized that catching Victor taught me something important about justice. It's not just about punishment or revenge. Real justice is about making communities safer, protecting vulnerable people, and ensuring that criminals face consequences for their actions. The glitter bomb and purple dye were satisfying in the moment, but the real victory was systemic change that prevented future victims. Every package locker installed, every security camera upgraded, every neighbor who started watching out for each other, that was the lasting impact of standing up to someone who thought they were untouchable. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's making sure the problem can never happen again, and building something better from the ashes of what was broken. Victor Chen stole from the wrong person, but more importantly, he underestimated an entire community's capacity to come together and protect each other, and that mistake cost him everything.